All right, folks, how you doing? Welcome back. So this is the Trojan Dynasty of Britain, Part 2. Disclaimer, under Section 107 of the Copyright Act 1976, allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, and research. So once again, we're going into Britain, the key to world history. The Brigantes of Britain. We do not regard this as a raid from Asia Minor into Greece, but rather as a sally from Frisia crossing the North Sea into Perthshire, and from thence into Argyllshire by way of the River Speen and the Lochs Lynn to the Hebridean or Ionian Sea, a name yet preserved in the island of Iona of so great fame. Been there before. That's where my ancestors are from, actually. This site can be identified. The learned 18th century antiquarian writer Thomas Baxter describes the Phrygians as those who early became masters of almost all Western Europe, stating that they used the name of Briges, Bruges, or Friges. He claimed that the Brigantes of Britain, the most numerous and powerful people in England at the time of the Roman conquest, were of that race. The oldest civilized people. He related them to the Phoenicians and said they called themselves Britas, later Britones or Britanni. The Brigantes, the Trojan settlers in Britain, claimed descent from Gad, otherwise the Chaldeans or Phoenicians, all of the same kindred. The name Brigi or Brigi takes us back to Herodotus, who in a certain passage says that the Phrygians claimed to be the oldest civilized people. But the Brigi of Macedonia and Thrace said that the Phrygians were descended from them and took the name Phrygian later. The city of Ham or Ammon. These Brigi can be traced to northeastern Scotland, to Caledonia, and it is not difficult to realise that some colonists originally made their way to the shores of what we now call Denmark and Hanover, and perhaps made their first settlement on the banks of the river Elbe or on the mouth of the Rhine. On the Elbe, or Albus, is the Hanseatic city of Hamburg, whose name suggests the city Ham or Ammon, and if place names afford evidence, was related to the Cushites or Chaldeans or Caledonians of Scotland, a name further recalled by Cuxhaven, the name of Hamburg's port, the port of Cush. We read the Bible allusion with fresh eyes, or we may read, quote, "And Cush begat Nimrod, who began to be a mighty one in the earth, and the beginning of his kingdom was Babel, and Erech and Akkad and Calnech in the land of Shinar." Genesis 8:10. I must not be tied to any suggestion. Genesis 10:8-10. Beg your pardon. I must not be tied to any suggestion that Troy or Babylon necessarily lay where is Hamburg, for it is conjectural. For once actually sitting on the fence, which is rather unusual for him. Phrygia, later Frisia, is another matter, and farther west is the ancient port of Bruges, preserving the name Brigi in the region of the Belgae. Also did the Morn dwell in Mysia and the Marini of Caesar at the mouth of the Rhine. There's also the theory that Robert the Bruce is really Robert of Bruges, which is a theory that's forwarded by David Icke, I believe, in The Greatest Secret. The Frisian Isles. In Mysia lived the Tushthranes or Tuthranes, claiming descent from Tusher. It is mere coincidence that the Tushtanf or Techthreni lived not far from Treves and were decimated by the Romans at the confluence of the Mosa, the Meuse, and the Rhine. The incorrect or varied spelling of proper or place names is not infrequent in Caesar. Hear what the fucking top comments about. Anyway, another city in the region of Mysia was Pergamus, a great city celebrated for its fabrics and its arts. And off the Pergamene coast lay a number of famous islands which correspond with the Frisian Isles. Aphrodite and Aesculapius, how do you say this? Aesculapius, I'm guessing. Anyway, it was a pagan cathedral city, a university town, and the royal residence of its kings, where was the throne of Satan. Don't get how you get a pagan cathedral, but anyway, that's Beaumont for you. If it was pagan, it wouldn't be a cathedral, would it? I mean, it would have to be Roman Catholic to be a cathedral to begin with, one would think, but I didn't write it. Here, Dionysus, Aphrodite, and Asclepius were especially worshipped. It became an early seat of Christianity, one of the seven churches of Asia, quote unquote, which would actually explain why they can't find the seven churches of Asia, but let's give Beaumont the benefit of the doubt there. The Pergamene kings descended from Athens, allied themselves with the Romans, and Athens III made Rome his heir. I'm sure that won't backfire. There is reason to believe that Pergamus may be sought as the later Cologne, where the Romans planted a colony in AD 51 and made it a colonia. In a curious work, 3 kings of Cologne were named Melchior, Balthazar, and Jasper. The banks of the Moselle. Mysia was a regional name of unexplained origin which embraced generally Phrygia, Lydia, and other regions mentioned. The river Mosa, or Meuse, like the name Moselle, seems to have been related to it, and this comprehensive title to the region may well have been taken from Moses, signifying the territories where he showed so much activity in his maneuvers in Phrygia and Lydia. As to Treves, that ancient city on the banks of the Mosel, it seems justifiable to connect it with the Assyrians on the Rotes House in the centre of the city. A late Gothic building in 1450, or of 1450, is a proud claim inscribed in the 17th century, which reads, Ante Romam Treveris stetit amus, a declaration that Treves was built 1,300 years before Rome. Nineveh's fall. So this claim was based on a local tradition that it was founded by Trebeta, son of the early Assyrian monarch Ninus, the builder of Nineveh, and husband of the famous Semiramis. So complete was Nineveh's fall at a date ascribed 606 BC, but infinitely earlier, that the very site and name disappeared until Layard claimed its discovery in Iraq last century. Yet in Belgium, not far distant, whether coincidence or not, the name still survives in the town Ninove, not far from Brussels. If there was a vestige of proof of Layard's correct identification, how came these Assyrian traces so many thousands of miles distant from it, and where they fit in naturally with the rest? The Treveri. So the Treviri or Treveri, both names appear in Caesar, were one of the most powerful of the Belgic tribes, who spoke a Celtic tongue, and in the opinion of Ridgway were trained, I don't know where I got that from, and in the opinion of Ridgway were related to the Cimbri, in other words, the Welsh. Thus may we retrace some of the lost part or past in which Europe, not Asia, was the true theatre of ancient world events. Well, that's Beaumont's MO, really, isn't it? I might enlarge on this subject to include the Medes and Persians, whose traces are to be found throughout Europe and even in Britain. It is logically preposterous to believe that these powerful and civilized states were dwelling in the largely infertile and desert tracts of Middle Asia, even though they also ruled there in a period of that vast slave-ridden empire. I know, preposterous, right? Who would the right mind would think of that? You gotta love Beaumont's arrogance, honestly. The Ascanians. So now I return to the search for the Trojans and first examine what Josephus makes of the Ascanians or Hellespontine Phrygians. They were, he states, descendants of Japheth, sons of Gomer, who was the founder of the Galatii, or Gauls, or Cimmerians. Of the 3 sons of Corner, I think that's maybe Gomer, Astyanax founded the Astyanaxians, now called the Rhygians by the Greeks. So did Riphath found the Riphians, now called the Paphlagonians, and Thurgama are related or named Phrygians. Before examining into the Astyanaxians or Ascanians, a brief epitome of the other 2 will indicate the probable locality of their settlements. Hammerfest and the Rapias Mountains. So the Rifasats or Rifasi of Norway dwelt by the Ripea or Hyperborean Mountains, whose lofty and snow-clad heights in the direction of Hammerfest still bear the name of Rapias Mountains. West of them were the Cimmerians, according to the Argonautica of Orpheus and Paphlagonia, whence some of them settled and were known as Eneti, e.g. Venetia, the Phoenicians, may be located in Pomerania between the Vistula and Oder rivers. The Phrygians are shown living in the later Frisia, were situated on their west. How comes it that the Ascanians came to be named Rhegians, or Rheganinians? I beg your pardon. Did you say this? Rheganidians. The Wrens of Galloway, so because when they migrated from Hellespontine Phrygia, or from the Rhine, they settled in Rhegium, a part of Graecia Magna, or Illyria, later named Bruttium after Brutus, subsequently Britain. We find it placed in classic maps in the toe of Italy, although it was really a part of Greek Illyria in the north. When the descendants of these Ascanians eventually founded Rome in 755, they had previously dwelt in Rhegium and Albania for over 300 years, where then was Rhegium. To seek it, one must search, but not in the Mediterranean Sea, but look to the peninsula of Wigtonshire in the Scottish lowlands, called the Wrens of Galloway, nearest point to the Isle of Man. The Kingdom of Strathclyde. The Wrens, including all Galloway and Kirkcudbrightshire, try saying that 5 times in a row, and a part of Cumberland, once bore the name of Reged. In the spacious days of King Arthur, Sir Owain, one of his most famous knights from those parts, was the son of Urien, Prince of Reged. This part of Britain was a prehistoric pedigree as Reged, or with a prehistoric pedigree as Reged, Latinized into Rhegium, became a focal point of the invading Trojans who set up the kingdom of Alba or Albany, to this day a royal dukedom, and subsequently termed the Kingdom of Strathclyde. The Welsh triads, setting forth the quote 3 pillars of the nation, included first Hugadarin, and next in order Prydain, Brutus, son of Aed the Great, Aeneas, who organised a social state and sovereignty in Britain. Mons Drumalbin, the spine of Scotland. In the early Saxon Chronicle I mentioned the Britas as the earliest inhabitants of Brytheen, except for the Picts and the Scots, yet these Britas were nevertheless termed Wellas, originally signifying strangers, where you get the surname Wallace from subsequently. These records point to the first institution of the Trojans or Phrygians or Ascanians in Reged, in the nearest parts opposite Ireland and forming a part of the Kingdom of Albany. In the ancient Scottish Chronicle and the De Situ Albami, I have no idea how you say this, Alba, Albania, or Albany was described as extending from Mons Drumalbin, the Brendalbane Mountains, to the Mare Hibernice, the Irish Sea, and Inchgall, Galloway, the Wrens being Inch, the isle or peninsula of the Gauls. Fergus More, descendant of Hercules. The ruling king at this time was Fergus mac Air, Fergus, son or descendant of Hercules. Another version, mentioned by Watmore, describes the kingdom of Albany as, quote, beyond Brendalbane to Inchgall and Schwachmunar, the Solway Firth. Thus is confirmed the settlement of the Ascanians or Trojans in Reged, now Galloway, stretching northwards to the borders of Perthshire. And it may be mentioned in passing that the Tudor kings claimed descent from the Trojans, a claim which the English historian Grote ridiculed and said that others, including the Franks, made a like claim. Justly, so did they, as Grote's error was due to his complete misinterpretation of classic geography. Of course, I mean, everyone's wrong except Beaumont, in the head of Beaumont. I'm not saying he is wrong, comments Beaumont, that is, but he's certainly rather unique in his interpretation of things, if I can put it like that. A quaint poem of the Dalriads. So there survives a quaint poem of the Dalriads, erst descendants of the Argives who ruled in Argyll, Ulster and the Hebrides, and who, as Argives, were anciently so famous in Greek lore. It affects to teach the Albans or Trojans their own history. I love Beaumont. His arrogance just cracks me up, it really does. It runs thus. Ye learned of all Alban, ye wise yellow-haired race, learn who first acquired the districts of Alban. Albanus acquired them with all his race, illustrious son of I have no idea how you say that. Ascanius. That's easier to say. Brother to Britus without treachery. From him Alban of ships takes his name. Britus expelled his intrepid brother over the sea of Icht. Britus acquired illustrious Alban to the lands of... I have no idea how you say that. You can read it off the screen. Oh, wait, is that it? Oh, I was just getting into it there. Anyway, hope you enjoyed this presentation, and as always, leave your thoughts and comments below. And soon I'll put up part 3.